Utah and Oklahoma State face off in a clash of some of the best the Big 12 has to offer. How will Cam Rising perform? Will he play? How about Ollie Gordan? Is he finally going to get it going? And who will come out on top? All that and more coming up on this Locked On Utes and Locked On Oklahoma State crossover.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Oklahoma State your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. If this is your first time checking out either of our shows, make sure you like and subscribe. We love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow both of our shows on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes and Locked On Oklahoma State is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. You can visit fanduel.com to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department, and I could not be more fired up to get this crossover underway with you, Cody Stovall. This game has been so hyped all offseason. I think it's the best matchup on the Big 12 schedule, and it's crazy still that that's how we open Big 12 play, but it's going to be such a fun Saturday night in Stillwater.
Oh, I could not agree more. There's a lot of reasonings why this game is naturally going to be big time. You have the old school hateful eight flag barriers of the Big 12 and the new big dog of Utah coming into the Big 12. Yeah, it's going to be exciting. The storylines kind of write themselves. And realistically, without OU, without Texas, there's not a lot of rivalries. The Holy War is going to be absolutely massive for the Big 12. Farmageddon, of course, is always going to be big. Iowa State, K-State. But we don't have a rival. It should be Texas Tech, but it seems like this Utah rivalry is just naturally coming along fairly quickly, and I like you cannot wait for the kickoff.
It's going to be so much fun. And I totally agree. I think it's just the consistency from both programs. If you look over the past few years, Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy, how they have built these powerhouses into shape that makes these two such natural rivals. So we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about the Utah offense, Oklahoma State defense first. Then we'll talk about Oklahoma State offense, Utah defense. And when you're starting with the Utah offense, you have to start with Cam Rising. Now, look, Brent McMurphy reported earlier in the week that he expected Cam Rising to play. Dorian Singer, Utah's receiver, said Cam Rising is going to play. The line has been doing all kind of weird things. But I even had someone on my show last week, Porter Larson of ESPN 700, who broke the news about Cam Rising's x-ray. He said that if last week was a big game, Cam would have played. I am still fully expecting Cam Rising to play in this game. We'll see how everything comes to pass. But there is still that question because we haven't even seen Cam Rising play 4 full quarters of football. What is he going to look like? Well, when he has been in, Utah's had success, but it's been against Southern Utah and Baylor. Now, they've scored on 8 of their 11 drives when Cam Rising has led the team, but this Oklahoma State team, now, is their defense going to end up being better than Baylor? That remains to be seen just with some of the issues they've had, but how's Cam Rising going to perform in this kind of a hostile environment when the other two games were at home? There's a lot that we don't know about how Cam is going to look, which feels weird because he's played a few games, but it's been against lesser opponents, obviously.
But I think you hit the nail on the head. Cam Rising is going to be a massive factor in this game. But, I've told you a little bit off air, Oklahoma State has a propensity to get dominated by running quarterbacks. And I know Cam Rising can run, but I would be lying to you if I didn't tell you that we weren't a little apprehensive about going up against Isaac Wilson. I'm not saying that Cowboy country is up in arms about facing Cam Rising, but when it comes to preparation, for some reason, Russian quarterbacks give us a hard time. So I really hope this is not a smoke and mirrors situation. And honestly, I want to see Utah at their best. I want to see Utah full of every starter that they have available, because not only does it help from a perception standpoint, but it also helps you notice if you're ready or not yet, right? We think we got a test with Arkansas, but we don't really know how good Arkansas is actually going to be. When I see film and team speed sideline to sideline, Utah does have some of that Arkansas capability that is a cause for concern. But my biggest concern isn't Cam Rising, nor is it Isaac Wilson. It's that stupid tight end, Kuithe.
He's so impressive, and I know that. Look, he has not had a game over 100 yards yet, but you look at the 3 touchdowns against Southern Utah, and he is just such a mismatch nightmare. There's been questions like, hey, how's he going to project in the NFL? He's kind of a tweener. Well, I just know the guy knows how to get open, catch passes, and make plays.
Right.
And unfortunately for Oklahoma State, we've seen them give up chunks of passes, chunks of plays in general so far. When you look at this Oklahoma State's team's defensive rankings, I do feel good. I'm just going to come out and say it. Overall in this game, I like a lot of the matchups for Utah based on what we've seen. When you're looking at this Oklahoma State defense, I've not been impressed by their defensive line overall. I feel like they've gotten blown off the ball in both the Arkansas and the South Dakota State game. Then you're looking at the secondary. There have been wide open receivers frequently. You rank 124th in yards allowed per game, 128th against the pass, 122nd in first downs allowed, even 92nd in rush yards allowed per game. So how much confidence do you have in this Oklahoma State defense that is going to be facing a Utah offense that, like I mentioned with Cam Rising, yes, concerns because he's still coming back, but when he's been under center, this offense has done what they're supposed to do and produce touchdown drives.
I would be absolutely hammered drunk if I were to sit here and pretend that our defense is amazing and it gives us the warm and fuzzies that help us sleep well at night. That's not the case. We're very well aware that our defense has not been performing up to expectations. Whenever you have essentially 9 returning starters out of 11 dudes, that continuity alone should equal enough communication to not have wide open holes, but it is happening. Now, I will say, we've been experimenting with a different iteration of the 3-3-5. Originally, it was going to be Colin Oliver playing a stand-up defensive end roll that could also, flash and play a boundary or get out to the numbers. But he's not playing, right? So I think we're going to have to schematically change some things with Kendall Daniels. He went from a safety to a linebacker to, I think he might fulfill that Colin Oliver style role. So we don't even know exactly what our defense is yet. And this is not exactly the best time to just be figuring it out.
Yeah, that's where it does get tough. You do have special players still, though. I really like Nick Martin. I mean, he's a guy you just can't. Every time you turn on the tape, you're like, okay, so that's going to be interesting. The Utah offensive line has been up and down. I think Arkansas's running game might be better than Utah's. I think that's going to be a narrow thing. I'm curious how that progresses along the season. So is Utah going to be able to consistently generate push? Now, I do think whether it's Kuithe, Dorian Singer, I do think some of these Utah players are going to be able to win against Oklahoma State defensive backs. So then that's where it pops up for Cam. Is he going to miss throws because he's rusty? Is he going to be dialed in and on the money? When Utah's lost games with Cam Rising, there have been some big road games where he hasn't been able to perform. Now, a lot of times that has also come against, I would say, like an NFL caliber quarterback, and as good as Alan Bowman's played, we've talked about that in a moment. I don't view him as one of those, the Bo Nix, Michael Penix, and all of those guys of that caliber. So I'm curious to see how that factors in on the other side of the ball, and we'll touch on it in a moment. But I do expect this Utah offense to be able to move the ball. It's going to be interesting to see just if it is for sure Cam Rising, or if it ends up being they have to put Isaac Wilson out there. How does Utah's offense all come together? They got off to a slow start against Utah State. Then it clicked, and they were able to kind of get rolling from there. But it's going to be fun to see how they perform. And I think, Cody, one thing that Oklahoma State fans have got to be excited is to hopefully try and get Ollie Gordan finally going, because he has not hit the ground running like, of course, Cowboys fans will have hoped. Now, I'm also going to say this is probably the best. It is the best front seven you will have faced so far. So how is that matchup going to factor into things? That's what we're going to talk about in one moment. But first, want to take an opportunity to talk with you all about our friends at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. You can just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sports book today and mention that great offer from NFL Sunday Ticket, so you can not only watch all the NFL games but bet on them too, and the great slate of college football games we have coming up over the next few weeks. That's where FanDuel has you covered. Cody, speaking of FanDuel, this line has been all over the place for Utah and Oklahoma State. What's your kind of read on just how it has jumped all over?
I think that's kind of part of the expectation, if whether Cam Rising is going to play or not going to play. Regardless, you should hammer the over, whether you're a Ute or a Cowboy. This is an opportunity for you to maximize your dollar bills department.
I agree. I'm feeling the over as well. I think both offenses are going to be able to have some success moving the ball. We'll talk about it from the other vantage point in a moment. Line is currently in favor of the Cowboys 2.5. However, you're leaning on it. Make sure you head over to FanDuel today. Also, want to tell all of you about another sponsor of this crossover episode. Hey, Locked On Utes and Locked On Oklahoma State fans. Have you heard about ROY? It stands for Return on You. And it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. ROY changes the NIL game for fans. You can go through ROY and directly support the players that you're trying to keep on your team. ROY allows fans to directly back their favorite athletes. With ROY, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams, with athletes maximizing their name, image, and likeness potential. You can use ROY to engage with athletes on their NIL journey. Fans not only support athletes financially, but also become part of their name, image, and likeness journey, helping them find success both on and off the field. You can download ROY for iOS or Android and enter the referral code Locked On. That's all caps with a space. So locked is capitalized, space, and then on with O&N, both capitalized as well. And you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstake to win $5,000 cash. You can visit roy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. You can get ROY on the app or iOS, Android, and start making an impact on your favorite team. Get off the sideline and into the NIL game today with ROY. All right, Cody, I talked about, I think Cam Rising is the most fascinating angle for Utah offense, Oklahoma State defense. Where would you like to start on the other side of the ball?
Buddy, I couldn't give 13 turds if Ollie Gordan has a big day or not, because as much as our deficiencies are in the back end of our defense, I think the same can be said for Utah. You mentioned your front seven being pretty legitimate, and you guys naturally are just a team that is kind of oriented around stopping the run anyways, even if it's not an elite running back. So again, I think we've proved a multitude of times now that we don't have to have 150 yards from Ollie Gordan to win ball games. If teams are going to play tight in the box, we're going to go deep and we're going to have fun doing it. And I do not know that our corners and our DBs can slow y'all down, just like I don't know that y'all can slow our wide receivers down. But if that is a battle that I have to bet FanDuel money on, I'm taking the Cowboys wide receiver core over the Utah wide receiver core all day, every day, no matter what Ollie does or doesn't do.
This Oklahoma State wide receiver core is talented. You look at Stribling already, right? 295 yards, 17 receptions. Owens is averaging 17 yards a catch as well, 188 yards, 11 receptions. Presley, I mean, even a guy like Shurton, right, who's averaging 30 yards a reception, 121 yards for him, right? So it's a talented group of pass catchers in there. But I do believe this is a talented Utah defensive backfield as well. Yes, they gave up yards against the Aggies, but
245 of them through the air, to be exact.
I know, but did you see that Smith-Snowden interception in the end zone?
I did, and I also, who is that number 15, Tyo Johnson?
Tyo Johnson is a
Dude, that's fast. If he gets the ball in his hands, I don't know that we catch him.
Yes, I think that Utah has. So what you're saying is I absolutely agree that Oklahoma State is going to make plays downfield. They're going to win some of those 50-50 balls, and they're going to move the chains, and they're going to pick up chunk yardage. Because there's also plays where I mentioned Smith-Snowden. He made that great end zone interception. There's a touchdown where he just gets absolutely smoked off the line as well, too. So that's where he is still young, growing, and developing. But they are talented players. Smith-Snowden's a former 4-star guy. You get a Tyo Johnson, who we've raved about a little bit already. Cameron Calhoun had another interception last week. How do you feel about Alan Bowman protecting the ball? Because as I mentioned, I do feel like these Utah defensive backs where, hey, if you're consistently just going 50-50, they're going to come down with one or two of them.
I mean, I don't feel great about it. Alan Bowman definitely has improved from last season. He had an issue with his base and his platform, and he had a propensity to bail out of the pocket and take off running like he ran a 4.7, 6, 8. He doesn't. He runs like a 5.2. So I don't know why the dude keeps trying to run, but this year has been different. But just like you mentioned earlier, the test from Arkansas in the first half was absolutely abysmal. I don't see Utah making the same number of mistakes that Arkansas did. I think that them being kind of young and immature and not able to close out games was part of that. The fact that we have 57 upperclassmen was also part of that. So if the game gets tight, my money is going to be on the Cowboys. My concern is if Utah gets up big and we have to have Alan Bowman put the team on his shoulders and throw us into a victory, that's when things become slightly problematic. Maybe we don't need Ollie to go crazy, but we need him to do enough to keep the defenses honest.
So when we were talking earlier about, I feel good about Utah's front seven, and I will say it seems like they had one of their best linebackers miss the game last week. I do not know if he's going to play, so that will still be a loss. Lander Barton still available. Corrine Reed, the one who will be out. But this Utah defensive line, I mean, it's just deep, and they just got big dudes up there. They excel at taking on double teams. This is by far the best pass rush, and I should focus on the run defense because actually you guys have not allowed Alan Bowman to be sacked, which I do think is very impressive. So we need to talk about that in a moment too. But what do you think has been the biggest issue when it comes to not getting Ollie Gordan going? And do you think against a run defense in Utah that did finish top 5 last year with pretty much everyone back, do you think there's a chance that something could click this game and he could get going?
I mean, there's always that chance. We showcased it last year. Like that was that. This is the conundrum that nobody can figure out. We had to change. We were a zone blocking scheme, offense for 8-9 years ish. And then we changed it because it didn't suit our offensive line, nor did it suit Ollie Gordan. So we went back to like the Charlie Dickey, Kansas State, Colin Klein, old school style of offense. And Ollie goes for almost 1,800 yards. For whatever reason, those same O linemen, all 5 of them, the same quarterback, the same running back, the same everything other than fullback, for whatever reason, we cannot get it going. I think it's 2 things, brother. I think it's one part, I'm going to call it spade a spade. Our pass pro is like NFL level. You're right. We haven't allowed a sack in 9 of the last 12 games. Alan Bowman has not been touched.
Even against Texas?
But to me, yeah. Well, no, Texas was one of the few times that he had
double
digits.
Was the one. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, all in all, I feel pretty good about where we are, but at the same time, Ollie's becoming impatient. I think the difference between last year and this year is the first 3 games, he wasn't the starter. So there was like a rotation. Matter of fact, against South Alabama, he got 2 carries and 2 passes, if I recall correctly. That's it, right? So he was fighting for his job. When he got the job, obviously, he literally took off and ran with it. But I don't know, maybe it's some of that, frustration that you're seeing because the patience that he had last year to jump cut through holes that didn't exist, he's not doing that, especially in the last game. He was literally running into the back of his lineman. Like that's a freshman move whenever you get kind of frustrated and you don't see a hole. So you try to slam your lineman into, the DN for a couple extra yards. He's doing that instead of finding holes. So I think it's equal parts. The O-line is being kind of sharp and soft when it comes to run blocking. And he is so impatient and frustrated right now that he's not using his vision whatsoever.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. And, all players want to win, but the great players still want to be used when they win. So that is fascinating to monitor if that frustration comes, especially if, like you said, the running game isn't there, the game were to fall on Alan Bowman's shoulders, and he's turning it over a couple times. Is that the type of thing where we see an outburst on the sideline that something gets made more of? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but look, when star players aren't involved, we've seen that be the case before. So that is something interesting to monitor. And I mean, you mentioned again, but it is this is maybe me. I played offensive lineman in high school. It's just such a crazy disparity in me that you don't generate push in the run game. But the pocket for Bowman is fantastic. And so how much of that I do want to ask is, do you think, so Utah has some really good pass rushers, right? Connor O'Toole, Van Fillinger, just as recently before Utah State, were the 1 and 2 in the Big 12 in terms of sacks through the first few games, right? Dude, these are guys that have produced well.
That Van Fillinger is a beast, bro.
He's big.
And that number 58, you have also
Junior Tafuna inside.
Yeah, bro.
No, it's a deep defensive line. So I do want to ask you, how much do you think it is? Like, do you expect the pass protection to still hold up against the best defensive line that they faced yet?
Absolutely. Because if you mentioned
no sacks,
I don't know about no sacks because
Okay,
I don't know that we slow down that number 7 for the entirety of a game. But as far as like keeping him clean and upright for the majority of the game, I do think that's going to be fine because when you do look at the defensive line at Utah compared to the offensive line of Oklahoma State, on average, we do still have your defensive line by an average of 21 pounds. So it's not like you guys are going to, bully us, I don't believe. Arkansas, their D-line was significantly bigger than Utah's, and they didn't necessarily bully us either in pass pro. So I think we're going to be okay in pass protection, which is, again, why I think this game is going to come down to whose wide receiver room has a bigger day and whose DB room has a worse day.
I think it could very well come to that. I like that's where you went with it. We'll talk about our yep, you got it.
Oh, I was going to say, and if it does come down to kicker, y'all's kicker is kind of terrible. So
okay, terrible is strong. He had a rough game against Baylor, but if you look at his career, he still had some nice moments. But I mean, hey, your kicker obviously really stepped up in the Arkansas game and some of the other games. I got to give you that.
Dude, I'm telling you now, the best kept secret in Stillwater, Oklahoma that hasn't been utilized enough yet is our punter from Australia. The dude is 6'2", 220 pounds, and runs a 4.6 40. He was an All-American level rugby player. He loves contact, and he has told me to my face that he cannot wait to lay somebody out.
I would. Hey, I'm not opposed to a punter hitter. I think that would be fantastic. Jack Bowman here, Utah punter. I want to say he's from Australia. Utah fans, you can roast me in the comments if I got it wrong, but I actually think Utah has a Australia punter as well. So, and Utah's punter is pretty good too. So we should see some big punts. And that actually is something I want to talk about is strangely enough punting to go along with our predictions. Weird twist that I want to take in one moment. That's what we want to close this one out with our game predictions. Who's going to win? We're breaking that down to wrap up this crossover. But first, if you're still looking for tickets to get to the game, then you got to check out Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events faster and easier. Game Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Guys, I love Game Time because it gives you so many fantastic features, like a panoramic view from your seat. How often have you bought a ticket and you don't even know what it's going to look like? That's not an issue with Game Time. There's also that low price guarantee where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. How about that flexible ticket coverage? Game Time ticket coverage is the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. There's also all-in pricing that you have a feature that is fantastic. So if you're looking to up your ticket game and just take the guesswork out of buying tickets, you got to see Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Capital L-O or capital L for locked, O for on, and C for college. Only the start of each word is capitalized, and once again, no spaces. For $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Very interesting stat that I want to talk about before we do our predictions. I should have brought this up earlier. Okay. In your first two games, the South Dakota State game, and then also looking at the Arkansas game, your 26 drives your defense faced, you only forced 3 and outs twice. Now, if you include the Tulsa game, that number goes to 38 drives faced, 5 3 and outs. Why do you think this? Because this defense, they have the Tulsa game as well as like the South Dakota State game, right? Like they will bend, but they don't break. Why do you think there has been those issues when it comes to like just going in, getting a 3 and out and getting off the field?
I think we're still making way too many mistakes in the middle of the field, right? So the more field you have to play with, the more difficult it is for us. As the field shrinks, then the talent of Oklahoma State starts to kind of take over. And so you are right. We've been atrocious on third down. And the frustrating part about that is if you look at the Arkansas game, most of those were after like big sacks or something. So it was like 3rd and 13, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 16. That was the frustrating part. And I'll tell you again why we're a little bit more scared of Isaac Wilson than maybe a Cam Rising is because every time it was 3rd and 15, that stupid quarterback would rush for 20 yards. Like, goodness me. So whenever we have to be put in a position of spying, that's when things have become slightly problematic for us. And on top of that, I do think that, again, in the middle of the field, for whatever reason, maybe it's communication, maybe it's lack of understanding, but we are leaving massive holes in certain sections of the field. And I just think part of it is Brian Nardo's just not being aggressive enough. I hope we see the most aggressive Oklahoma State defense of the season in this game.
And I think both sides going to be throwing out all the stops, the best game plans. Utah came out last week. They did some things schematically I didn't like. They played Van Fillinger. We were both talking about already. We really liked him. There were stretches where Utah, because they were playing Bryson Barnes, a former backup quarterback on their roster, they did some different things. Like they tried to play Van as a D tackle, and they got gashed on the ground a little bit early because you should have your 2 defensive tackles in the game. That's not going to be an issue because obviously the respect they have for the Oklahoma State running game, just Ollie Gordan being Ollie Gordan, is more than they had for that Utah State team. So we talked about keys a little bit. I actually want to start with this one because you mentioned your key a little bit and that you can expand on it more in a moment. I actually think this one is going to come down to who owns the line of scrimmage, because I think that Oklahoma State is going to throw for more yards in this game. I just think that's what Alan Bowman and this offense are going to be forced to routinely do because they're going to end up becoming one-dimensional. But I do believe there's going to be several key drives and situations where Utah is going to be able to get that push up front on the offensive line. They're going to be able to get enough pressure on Alan Bowman where that's where it's going to end up being a difference. When you're one-dimensional against this Utah team, it's not a recipe for success I've seen in the past, and I just don't see this offensive line coming together to create the necessary push for Ollie Gordan to make this a well-balanced attack that gives Utah major issues.
If there's bulletin board material that can be used interior-wise, I think there's more than enough out there. If the offensive line is looking for some semblance of motivation, which I don't know why they would be, but if they were, they have caught more flack this week than ever in their careers because this is not acceptable. You cannot bring back a Doak Walker Award winner that rushes for almost 1,800 yards and begins the season top 5 Heisman. You cannot have that guy, right, convince every single O-lineman and help them all get paid extra NIL to return, and then you not give them holes to run through. It's got to happen eventually, or I do think that this is going to be perceived as a negative thing. The next time we have a big-time running back that wants to stay, maybe he does something different. Maybe he doesn't bring all 5 of his O-linemen back. So for the sake of this O-line class and the future of running backs deciding to stay, they need to start opening some daggone lanes where it's going to get crazy. I'm over here knocking stuff down.
Well, you know what? We're just fired up. That's why we're knocking stuff down. We've been loving talking about this game. We did a crossover, you and I did in August, because we were so fired up, and it's finally here. So there's only one thing left to do, Cody. Let's pick winners and talk about how it's gonna play out. Cody, who wins? How does the game go?
I mean, I legitimately think that this is going to be a high-scoring affair, and if it gets in a situation where there's some semblance of a track meet, I do favor the Cowboys. The biggest thing here, and I think this is agreement for Utah fans, you know what we can do offensively through the air. You know what we used to be able to do offensively on the ground. If those two merge, Utah's going to have a long day. My prediction is 41-38 Cowboys.
Like it. Definitely high scoring, as you mentioned. And you mentioned that's the interesting thing, right? Is like, do we see the old Ollie Gordan? Do we see the old Cam Rising? Whichever one of those players looks probably closer like themselves is probably going to end up being the victor. And I actually do think that's going to end up being Utah, because I think Cam Rising is going to play well in this game. I think because of Oklahoma State's deficiencies in the secondary, receivers going to be open. And I will say, I'm actually going to go a little bit lower scoring than you, because I think Cam is going to miss some throws. I think there will be stretch. I think Utah's first drives of the game against both Oklahoma, against Baylor and Southern Utah, both resulted in touchdowns. I think Andy Ludwig's scripted stuff is really good. So I expect Utah to start hot. I could even see them scoring on their first 2 drives, but I expect them to cool off a little bit. I think Oklahoma State adjustments, as well as I do think Cam will show some rust in this game. I think he's going to miss a few throws. And just like with Oklahoma State, I think Alan Bowman, there's going to be times where the Utah defense frustrates him. There's going to be a time where Oklahoma State Cowboys receivers, they're going to win downfield, and it's going to be a big play, and Stillwater is going to be going absolutely wild. But in the end, I feel like Utah has the better defense. I feel like they're the more well-rounded team, and I think Cam Rising is going to make a couple of game-winning plays, as he's often done, maybe even with his legs, Cody, to give Oklahoma State fans, make them pull out some hair from their heads as well. I'm going Utah 34-26.
Okay. I can't argue against it. right? I mean, I will.
I'm not arguing against yours. I think I can
I
absolutely see
will,
it.
but it's logical. It makes sense. It very well could become a defensive-minded battle. That's the thing is, like, Oklahoma State has so much NFL talent on the defensive side of the ball that it's beyond frustrating to not be able to figure out why we have so many massive gaps on third downs. But again, as the field shrinks, the natural athleticism, starts to kind of kick in because again, we have a 6'5", 245-pound corner that runs a 4.5 40. We have dudes that are SEC level. They just haven't always been playing like it. So this has got to be the game where it all combines. The defense has to step up and play better than just decent. The offensive line has to do more than simply just pass pro. And I think our wide receivers are going to have to do a lot of getting over the top of the D.
Both these teams will have to play their best performance by far this season in order to get a victory in this one. It's two of the best teams in the Big 12, undoubtedly two of the top three, where however you want to shake up the rankings. And Cody, I think you did make one mistake on this show, is you gave Cole Becker, Utah's kicker, bulletin board material, sir. So if Cole Becker makes a big time kick, I think we're going to know who motivated him to.
Cole Becker ain't got not a nothing on Hudson Cawk. Write it down. Take it to the bank. All right.
It will be. Hey, we'll see if it comes down to a big kick. Either way, this is going to be a great showdown in Stillwater. Can we both agree that game day should have gone here?
Yeah, no. And that's the kicker too, is we were all Houston fans for a day because if Houston would have beat OU, because they should have, then the game day does come to Stillwater. We all knew that the Josh Heupel versus old team OU was going to be a storyline no matter what happened. And if both teams were undefeated, the ESPN SEC pump train was going to happen. And that's precisely where we are. And you are seeing a lot of prognostications ranking this as the top game of the week. But game day doesn't care because they have a propaganda piece that they have to push. And it just so happens to be the SEC, which is why, JT, I'll tell you at the end of the day, I don't care who wins the Big 12. I really, really, really don't.
Really?
Oh, I really don't. I mean, of course, I think it should be us. I want it to be us. But I just want somebody, I don't care if it's Utah, TCU, Baylor, UCF, somebody needs to crash the national title party. That's the only way the Big 12 is going to get respect. If TCU, after beating Michigan, would have just played somewhat admirably and lost by 15, we don't have this conversation. But unfortunately, everybody talks about, well, the Big 12, the best in the Big 12 got their skulls drug by the best in the SEC. So therefore, they have miles to go. And they're not entirely wrong, but I don't care who it is. Somebody from this conference needs to go crash the CFP party and make a statement. I'm not saying that somebody has to win the national title, but don't get your doors blown off by 50. That's it.
Now that we absolutely agree on. I am getting so sick and tired of the SEC and Big Ten agenda. You hit the nail on the head perfectly with what's going on with game day this week, in my opinion. I mean, they just went to LSU, South Carolina, and I understand the narrative that they can craft, but being such a clash of titans that is with such big conference implications, Utah, Oklahoma State, I feel like it was a big missed opportunity, and I am totally all in on a Big 12 team going in, regardless of who it is, just messing it up for these SEC. We're the best, this and that, some of the stuff that gets spewed out there. It drives me nuts. And you know what? The leader in the clubhouse for which team is going to be the one to wreck the SEC and Big Ten's college football playoff dreams is probably going to be the winner of this game, at least the favorite to do so. So we're all done talking about it. We appreciate all of you for tuning in. Cody, this was a lot of fun, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Bro, we could do this all the daggone time. Honestly, I love it. Thank you.
Honestly could. Hey, maybe, and hey, hopefully it's a good game. We can maybe even renew it next week.
I ain't scared.
I'm not either. I can't wait.
You mentioned the Big 12 title race. We have K-State next week.
That's right. You do. We have Arizona, who I'm not scared of anymore.
No, dude, they looked very, when you mentioned one-dimensional, their whole team kind of looked slightly one-dimensional against K-State.
Yeah, it's you find McMillan and everything else is.
Do y'all play K-State? We
don't actually. We miss K-State and Kansas, although I'm not as scared of Kansas anymore either, obviously.
Dude,
We got UCF.
We could do a whole episode talking about the disaster that's happening in Colorado and the ridiculousness that's taking place in Lawrence, Kansas, but we won't. We'll stay in our lane.
Yeah, we've taken enough of your time for today, but I promise you, we also have a fun Big 12 show where we do hit on some of those things. So check out the Big 12 Squad show. Me and Cody are also going to be popping up on Locked On College Football, breaking this game down. If you want all things Locked On Utes and Locked On Oklahoma State, you know where to find us on your channels as well as in several other places. That's going to do it for this crossover episode. Hope you all enjoy the game. We'll be coming back with another show on Friday to preview some of the few other keys in this matchup. But we hope you enjoy this big time Big 12 clash between Utah and Oklahoma State.
God bless. Go Pokes.